Do you have us back online? Okay, call the meeting back to order. And we're still on 7.2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we went through planning. Is there any questions on that?
Okay, no. I don't know.
Yeah, ASB.
Put the cookie
Okay.
back in your mouth.
So with Ag Service Board, there was a slight increase, and that's due to the reduced reduced grant funding. However, from the province, we have guaranteed funding for the ASB grant till 23.
Okay, any questions?
And they reduced slightly, like the rat control and that sort of thing. They reduced that slightly as well, because they're just doing range 1, and that's it, right? Range 1. Yeah, they're just doing range 1. Yeah, not range 2 anymore. So, all right.
Let's see.
So as we talk about the 20th percentile, we talk about strategic spending and investment and things like that. Would the appropriate time for consultation on allocating specific strategic funds to specific areas of investment? For example, ag services. Like, I think that southeastern Alberta is clearly a food and agricultural hub, and should be more so. In the future, moving forward, I know that underneath of our reserves, we're going to be allocating, or would likely be allocating, more funding to that kind of strategic investment. But at what point do we talk about allocating more to things like agriculture, the ASB? I think about the last meeting that we had with regards to the land roller and those kind of conversations. I think it would be valuable for council to have a conversation at some point about additional grants to help to create additional value that would help to bring in more, and that ag services can kind of help to govern and decide what the priorities are and things like that. My question is at what point do we start having those conversations? Because I think that is going to be a part of our implementation of the new tax kind of approach and methodology. We're talking about budget 2021, but there's projections for others. Maybe just a little feedback from you on what you think that maybe looks like. I know it's way out. We've never talked about this before, but I'm just kind of curious as to how and when we bring that in, because I think it probably will fit into this coming year with some discussions, whether or not we have budgetary items or line items allocated to that this year or not. I don't know.
So I don't think it's needed anymore, but in the past, the Agricultural Service Board, to get the grant, had to do a strategic plan. And so if it was a ASB initiative, review the previous strategic plan, and then that would be presented to council for consideration. If that was like looking at developing more value added programming, could possibly be a fit.
Would the Ag Service Board potentially, because I think that the strategic investment that I'm envisioning may be bigger than ASB, but maybe at the same time still working in tandem with. Like, I almost wonder whether that would fit within almost like a co-op between the Ag Service Board and economic development or something, because it's.
Would that be something like that would go hand in hand with Verge? Because Verge is our economic development.
I think like potentially Verge, ICF, ASB, like it's, if we're talking about creating a hub in the next 15, 20 years for agriculture in southeastern Alberta, I'm thinking Ag Service Board is going to be a part of that. I think that Verge is going to be a part of the attraction and retention of that. And I think that ICF is going to be a part of a regional vision that executes that. So just how we allocate money towards something like that and where it fits, whether it's ASB or whether it's through economic development or if it's something completely different.
So would something like a value-added commission with different players that is managed by the municipality, and they're getting given a certain amount of funds and they're accountable it would be to the county. You could do something like that, and perhaps a municipal corporation of sorts. But Verge, yeah, because they do for sighting and that sort of thing, and PEP does as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, PEP should be in this blend because they have a lot of the expertise and contacts to work, and they work with the other trade regions.
Yeah, because they work with Braid and all of those other ones too,
Right.
to the north.
And I think it's called the Southwest Regional Development, the one at Lethbridge.
Yeah. So I think that that's something for the future, looking at, and yes, value added certainly is becoming more prevalent. It's worked very well in the Lethbridge area. It's something that we have, it'd be a good way to get Highway 41 south as, in better condition, because we'd have more, it could be, use that as it's going to be a greater, like a hub corridor for agricultural products, like that sort of thing. And there's a lot of spin-offs. But I think in the future, for sure, having something of a commission, not commission, but a board of sorts, and working on that, because there is a lot of opportunity there.
Any other questions on this, ag services? Okay, not seeing any, go on to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next one is tourism and economic development. So tourism, it has a portion in here explains the memberships that we belong to, and the key priorities. So the welcome center, and so the budget has increased draft from 97 to 160, and that is the provisions of the welcome center.
I'm just going to quickly jump in on this. Canadian Badlands pretty well doesn't exist. We don't belong to Port of Plains anymore, I don't think. Oh, so you belong on your own, not through PEP. Okay, that's fair. Okay, that's fair. It's just, I know because PEP left. So anyway, that's.
Any other questions? We applied for a grant for these, for the wages for that, did we not?
And
that
as far
is-
as I know, we haven't got anything back yet.
Yeah.
Yes, first year municipalities could apply for it. So I heard it's oversubscribed and it will probably be booted off, but we'll see. 10th of May.
Okay,
One kind of quick question, I hope. I know, go home, but that because we're doing economic development, tourism and stuff in our visitor center, have we done any funding for, just so we could upgrade the road a little bit, the surface of the road that comes through the park to the golf club on Range Road 30? Because that's one of our tourist destinations and that road is a little crappy.
If, so that would be a consideration, like to bring forth to council to do that, but it's not on the plan, I believe.
that needs to be brought forth for the road plan when we come to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? The next one,
Okay, Parks and Rec, am I on the right one? Perfect. So it's proposed to increase from 672 to 785. Talks about the services and programming, the 2021 key priorities, and so some variances is there has been extra funds forwarded to Irvin and 7 persons.
okay, any questions?
Just one thing to add on this one, on the Parks and Rec, we've got some most funding that municipal operating sustainability transfer from the province. You're seeing that's part of the jump here too, is some of those expenses are in that contracted services cost. The revenue was all recognized under administrative budget, so you're not seeing the revenue here, but the expense is in this side.
End of the program.
Yeah, under the program, contract services and grants to individual organizations. So again, that's something that we wouldn't really expect to continue into future years. It's more a one-time thing that we're doing because we got the funding.
Because of the urban, they needed some help.
Robin?
And so this would be funded primarily through things like CAP and through recreation and money in lieu type of,
Along with general tax revenue would
Mainly
cover
general
this.
tax. It's funded through, it's funded through taxation. So your rec board funding.
Yeah.
What you contribute, that's where this comes from. So that policy, that's where it comes from.
And that's the $40 per capita is what funds us, right?
would it
No,
not?
that's just a Cliff.
Yeah.
So this part makes sense to me. I'm just thinking then, would it not make sense from a budgeting standpoint, or even from a reserve standpoint, to fund this through the recreation? So that it's a little bit more clear as to where the money's coming from and how we allocate that. Like it seems that if it's coming out of general revenue.
We could. So one of the ways that I kind of said earlier, the way that IT is done is there's a contribution to the reserve and there's a pull from the reserve for basically the same amount every year. So you could do the same kind of process here. We've essentially kind of skipped that step and put the net into the recreation reserve and built what's a true reserve, we'll call it. It's true funds in the reserve that we can pull back and utilize for on top of the operating budget. The way we build it right now is your operating budget for recreation is funded through general taxation. So essentially it's balancing itself each year.
There's some
You're not having to
user,
pull
get some user fees
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, but it's mainly pulled from.
current year. So it's the way that it goes this way is because it's fairly stable year to year, you can really rely on not having to dip into the reserve to cover your year to year fluctuations, right? Because we've established Rec 2 and the Rec policy. So with that, going through general taxation essentially just skips the step of going to the reserve and then essentially allocating the reserve and pulling from the reserve each year. But you certainly could. With us, the Rec 2 policy keeps it fairly straight each year. You're not seeing kind of peaks and valleys from year to year. So if you were seeing more peaks and valleys, then I would recommend for sure that you're going more straight to the reserve every year. Because we're fairly straight, there's not that kind of fluctuation. I think we're okay this way, but you certainly could do it that way. It'd be another way of looking at the same kind of perspective. It would show it a little different.
How does the budgeted fit with the actual then? Because again, in my mind, I'm thinking that if we have it, and maybe it's a bad comparison, but we have our capital replacement plan for vehicles, for example, where we contribute to, we pull from, we use that to replace vehicles. But every single year, unused funds stay in that category, right? And so you're always going to be able to access that down the road. Whereas right now, unused funds just goes into general.
No, it doesn't.
It wouldn't?
No. So at the end of the year, so if we have a surplus, this year we didn't because we had to write off some things. But at the end of the year, say I have $1 million, that's unallocated. So administration brings a recommendation of where council would like to see those funds placed. So
Sorry, maybe my wording was wrong, but not unallocated, unspent.
well,
So if we have money that's budgeted for recreation, but we don't spend it all on recreation, that you're saying then that all of that money that we don't spend on recreation goes into the recreation reserve?
So the unspent and unallocated are the same thing. So if we're overall $1 million, then we would bring a recommendation to council to say, okay, so we might need some money in reclamation for gravel, or we might need this or that. So we bring that recommendation to council to place that in the reserve accounts.
Yeah, so we're basically able to take funding that's ear tagged for rec and then reallocate that to something else.
Yep.
I'm asking the question, does it make sense to have a reserve fund that we allocate money to the reserve fund so that we don't end up stealing from Peter to pay Paul and then ending up with an infrastructure deficit in our recreation fund that is now being sent somewhere else And then we're looking going, well, we're going to have to fund this through the stabilization fund or whatever, because the same thing would apply then down the road with the way that I'm thinking about the ag services stuff or wherever. If you don't utilize what you have, if it goes into reserves, you have the ability to still utilize it. And it gives you a little bit more freedom and latitude to identify some bigger projects if you need to, if you have a slower year. That's just me. I don't know if that resonates with anybody else, but
At any time, if council, so the reserves are set up by motion of council. So at any time council wishes to redistribute, you can do that at any time. We have a plan and the policy gives a definition, but at any time you could redistribute that at any time. But, so we'll take note of that for sure. And so next year, during, after audit, and we'll see if we have surplus, then we'll part of the recommendation to council to place into those reserve accounts, we'll recommend to put some into rec.
So to further that through the chair, I don't want to go too long, but just to further that, the last 2 years, if I take the 2 years together, we're very close from budget to actual. So that's where I guess I kind of want to go back to that comment of if you were seeing big variances from that budget number, then certainly that would make a big effect on your reserve balance. Because of this one and the nature of Rec 2 and that policy kind of really guiding what we do in the year, we really don't fluctuate from that unless things like most come up where we get some other funding or special requests come up where we pull and allocate funds from a reserve. Because of those factors, we won't see a big swing in the reserve balance if we changed it and did it, say, under that approach. And as Tara Lynn mentioned, we could, I think we go back to what's the right amount in the reserves, in certain reserves, and we could always reallocate those. They're only restricted via council motion. So we could always reallocate it if we saw that there was a project of some type and we wanted to move some there. So I don't think necessarily one way or the other is right or wrong. Different ways of doing kind of the same approach, but important that we watch that reserve and watch budget to actual on each of the departments to make sure it's not that use it to lose it strategy kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And we have done that in the past. We've always moved money over if we needed it. We just pulled it out of the reserve. And if a project came up, yeah, I see him. Yeah, it's okay, Ernest. I know he's going to talk. Shane.
I have nothing to say. No. I agree with what you're doing. I mean, I know what you're getting at, Robin, but if, let's say we got 200,000 left over in direct fund, if it goes back into general, then if we got floods or something where we need to spend a bunch more money on roads because we got a bunch washed out, they can move it there instead of just leaving that you're getting at, just leaving that 200,000 indirect or leaving it in this account or leave it in here. If I agree with them of putting the surplus all in there and then we can divide it up where we need it.
Jeffrey, you had something?
We'll let Robin go first and then I'll just finish off real quick.
thanks. Actually, and I understand where you're coming from, but I actually think that that's exactly the reason why we need to have it there, because to take money that's allocated for recreation and put it towards flood mitigation, I don't think that that's proper management of finances. You know, no, I don't. We have other reserves. We have other ways to prepare and mitigate for risks. You have disaster mitigation, you have disaster funding, you have all those other things. That was the whole robbing Peter to pay Paul thing. You have to protect certain areas. It's no different than I would never advocate saying that if there was 250,000 left over in ag service, that we use it for flooding. That cheapens the effect of what ag service is able to deliver on their mandate too. And so, you know, I think that we do need to protect money that we allocate for certain service deliveries, and then act, you know, frugally and plan and be wise with the decision making that we make on others. But, you know, we've benefited from having more than enough money over 30 years. And oftentimes when you've got so much money that you don't have to be super tight with how you do stuff, you're able just to kind of say, oh, well, we'll take a little here, or we'll take a little bit there. But as things get a little bit more intentional and strategic, I think that we need to have a little bit more of a rigid approach to allocating funds and protecting kind of that plan.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, so my comment ties into all of this, which is specific to parks and playgrounds and, to reserve funds, which is just as a reminder to council that as part of the subdivision process, when we attach a subdivision condition that says the landowner has to provide either legislated through the Municipal Government Act, he either has to provide land for parks and open spaces or playgrounds, or the correct term is money in place of municipal reserve. Oftentimes it's referred to as cash in lieu, but the correct term is money in place of municipal reserve. So that money has to be allocated and spent only on the development of parks and playgrounds. That's the only thing it can be used for. So there's an example where that reserve fund may be carrying over to the next year because there were no parks or playground projects to allocate that money to, or maybe it's a recreation trail or something. So that money carries over, but at some point, well, when you do actually spend it, it has to be used for those purposes. And that's the only intent it can be used for. So just wanted to kind of, since we're in parks and playgrounds. So.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? On to campgrounds and faculties.
So, Mr. Chairman, campgrounds and facilities, the budget is there. So 164 to 168. There is some user fees from the campgrounds. It talks a bit about Cabin and Sandy Point. And is there any questions?
Robin?
We've talked quite a bit about campgrounds and how it ties in with tourism. Yet our budget basically is status quo. Are we building in any kind of plan of development or growth in like based on the numbers? I don't see that there is anything, and I know that we're bringing it forward. Down the road, we're looking at the potential of developing more or whatever. If that's something that we're looking at doing, I'm wondering if we should be building something in for that.
Kim?
So we recently, it'll be in the next public works report because it just it's actually completed this morning, but we got a grant funding for the camp kitchen. And for what you're talking about, expanding and looking at that, we're coming back with, that'll be in the capital portion, because that's over that $10,000. But this is more of just the operations of the facilities, but to expand and to do.
Yeah, more campgrounds and cabins.
That's it. And we have that to come in the future. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on.
Library and culture. And so it has decreased slightly. And so the services and programs. So myself and Councillor Darcy met with Petra from Shortgrass. It was an awesome meeting, and we got some things hammered out and about who's doing what, and it was really good. So we have a plan of how we're gonna make sure that there's no more confusion. Would that be correct?
Okay, any other questions on it? Not seeing any. Public Works. Oh, Fleet Service.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so before you is the fleet services. It's an internal transfer. So you'll see that funded portion of internal transfers, and the expenditures balance out. Services and programs provided is mentioned there, and there is for variances, it just explains that it's utilizing decreases due to actuals.
Okay, any questions? Not seeing any. We'll move on.
Through the chair here, one comment on fleet services. One of the things that I want to, I guess, to kind of bridge the gap between budget and financial reporting. And so when we get to the audit, one of the things you won't hear Derek talk about on his audit presentation is fleet costing. The reason being is that this is costed internally. So it's basically like a department to department cost. So it's an expense to one department. It's an income to the fleet department. So if Ag uses the truck, it's their expense, but the fleet got the income. Under accounting rules, you can't recognize internal revenue or internal expenses. You'd basically be overstating your revenues and overstating your expenses. So these get backed out entirely for when we get into audit or financial statement presentation. So I just wanted to bridge that gap for you, that that's why you'll never hear the auditor talk about fleet costs or fleet revenue specifically.
It comes from the same pot.
Doesn't show when your eyes are closed. Public Works?
So Consolidated Public Works, so the combined budget is there. So last year, the budget was 13.3. This year, it's 13.1. Below is services and programs provided, gravel roads, hard surface infrastructure, hamlets, and to follow is gravel roads on page, I'm not sure what that would be for you guys. 82 breaks it down further.
Any questions?
And so this is utilizing the new the pilot project for the operational plan. You'll see that contracted services has gone down, but wages has gone up, and that's the offset. And also the additional offset will be less utilizing equipment more. And so you'll have per hour costs will be lower, and also too will be running less equipment.
Ernest?
I believe my question about the Range Road 30 in the park, whether it be hard surface or oil serviced or worked on this year, well, I was supposed to ask the question of roads, and I think this is roads.
So what would you be thinking, that we just do some fill of potholes and that sort of thing and grading? Is that what you would like to propose?
It's a mix of gravel and pavement, so it's kind of hard to blade. I think Kim's thought maybe if we put MG30 on it would be a good thing to do. Because it is the road that all our tourists and stuff would take to get to the golf course.
So does that go into our 5-year road plan when we discuss that, or do we discuss it on this?
So the road that that was in question is going from, and correct me if I'm wrong, is from the top of the bench and then going south. So the bench that goes through the park and then goes south to the golf course entrance. I think that's roughly 800 meters or something, maybe a kilometer. But that's the road that he was talking about. It's really potholed and it's in disrepair coming from the north. He's talking about the road that goes to that goes on the top of the bench, and then it goes south, like it goes goes all the way to the.
Right, so you go over to
Yep. It needs love. So that one we can, because it is operating, we have included in the public works plan is our soil stabilization program, and it's later on in the agenda, but that could be added to the program because that. If council so chooses, that would be a good mix because it's gravel. It's actually an old oiled road that we oiled for parks 20 years ago, I believe.
I have no idea how it got sort of oiled.
Yeah, but anyway, it's part oil, part gravel, and then part some pothole mix, I guess. So it's a combination of everything, that road. But that might be one for the soil stabilization program, depending upon council, or it might be a conversation with parks on a shared project. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
So, Mr. Chairman, would council like us to talk to Parks and come back with a plan, or put it on the list in the net for the MG30 listing?
And council has to, Richard?
Isn't that part of that road in the parks? I thought that the parks ended right where the golf course turnoff was. So if you're gonna work on the parks part, you have to get permission.
We'd have to get a permit, yeah, on that.
But it is in our road allowance.
Well, it doesn't matter, it's still in the park, right?
The road allowances are ours in the park. They don't own the park, they're our property.
How about we look into it?
Let's look into it, but anyway, it's not helping our budget. So it's something we can get you guys to look into, but yeah.
Anyway, it's just, I'd like to see it dealt with.
It does need, like, I go down there once in a while to golf, and yes, it does need some help.
Okay, so make a list of that and bring it back with some ideas. Okay, next.
So water, both on water, perfect. So under revenues, our revenues are 1.5, and our expenditures are slightly less this year at 4.2. Services and programs provided, it talks about where potable water is provided, and key priorities, and that is the capital at 7 persons, and then also to well, that'll be wastewater, but at Irvin we're doing a wastewater upgrade there too.
Any questions on it, Robin?
So we're subsidizing 2.5 million a year in water.
Mhm.
Is that fairly normal when it comes to municipalities, or would water not be targeted to be a cost recovery? Like, I can understand, having money allocated in reserve for infrastructure upgrades and improvements, but I'm thinking with this right here, we're talking probably more,
We have a 30% recovery, 25 to 30% recovery rate.
and that's normal.
It depends on the municipality. We have challenges because we're so there. We have such a vast traveling up to everywhere. Traveling, like for going to Hilda, Schuler, a lot of those costs is travel. And then our director of public works is working with the utility supervisor to look at ways to implement measures to make it more effective. But this historically is the cost recovery that occurs.
Is the 30 to 50%?
Yeah,
That's
to
what
20.
you're talking about?
Yeah, that's in the outlying areas. Yeah. So there was when the I believe the director presented that.
Yeah, there's some plans in there to try and bring that cost down this year.
It was part of the operational
Yeah.
plan, I'd say 2 months ago.
I guess the depreciation is a big component here, and the depreciation would be associated with like the water line to Walsh. Is that basically what that is? Okay,
Yep.
yeah, because if you take the depreciation out, now we're down to almost the cost recovery on what's being used anyways.
But that's, so yeah, with depreciation, there in urban settings, depreciation, the water rate covers depreciation as well.
Mhm.
So it is a big cost.
And one thing this doesn't show is the capital funds put into infrastructure. So a lot of our grant dollars have went to utility-based projects,
Mhm.
and that's not captured in here too. So if you looked at everything with capital funds and capital funding, your percentage cost recovery would be dramatically lower.
So basically, the more access to water that we provide, if it currently scales, we're going to increase our liabilities as we increase the access to water.
Mhm.
Just to give you a really quick bit of insight, we had a really casual. Just a really quick comment on that. Kim, myself, and Kayleen just had a really impromptu conversation about if we're looking to reduce some of these infrastructure costs, how could that look, and planning and assessment and people getting together to solve some of those problems, to bring those down as we scale. It's only $7,000 to go across a property line, but it might be 12 million to go that 12 miles. So we want those $7,000 costs to go next door instead of 12 million. So just those kind of concepts are happening at the impromptu level right now, but things that we're aware of anyway.
And a lot of times too, in particular if water, so Water for Life funded a lot of programs and capital projects. And it's like anything, you can get grants and build it, but it's the maintenance and depreciation that no one expects.
Darcy?
That's the tough part.
I think on the rate that we charge, it's 80% recovery. And like you said, we use grants for the capital, for the infrastructure.
Yeah, 80% recovery on the water coming in.
The rate that we charge is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If,
But if you're
if
doing-
we're at 80, we were going to be at 80 in a certain year. I don't know if we're there yet or not.
I don't think we are.
Here, we could present it again, like we did that a couple months ago and talked about it. Yeah. Yeah, it's staggered, but I don't think we're meeting that 80. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we weren't. That was the target, but we're just for the water. Yeah,
Yeah.
just for the water, not for the associated capital costs.
Anything else? Okay. On to the next one.
So wastewater, and so the this is actually a good news story. It's closer to recovery, and so we have budgeted user fees of 346, and our expenditures are 561.
Any questions? Not seeing any. Waste management.
So, Mr. Chairman, so we have user fees of 91, and our contribution for waste management in its entirety is 814, and that's to run the transfer sites as well.
Any comments? Mhm. Oh, hey, that was it. Holy smokes. Might get one thing done before 5 o'clock. Okay, we've seen it. Now I need to go back to the beginning to see what the heck the recommendations were. Somebody want to make a recommendation to approve the budget? Richard?
For your adjustment? Yep.
I did clarify with Travis, my misunderstanding was that the 2020 was budgeted and not actual. And so technically my request for an amendment would be unnecessary because the budget is the budget. I think moving forward, the preference would be to be able to see budget and actual. That was my confusion. And so I think we can leave it as recommended here.
Okay, so that'll be the first, we got two here.
Recommendation number one for me.
Number one, okay. Any other questions about it? Not seeing any, I'll ask for the vote. Carried. Somebody want to make the second part to transfer the Robin's making the second part? Any questions on it? Vote. Carried. Oh, got past number 7. Number 8. Oh, what are we at here? No. That's what I was just thinking. Somebody want to make a motion to extend past 5, Ernest?
Are we hoping to get everything? Like with how much we have to go, I would almost,
It's up to you guys.
honestly, I'd prefer to reconvene even Thursday afternoon. Like there's a lot to go through yet. I would prefer not to rush through it, but if we need to. It's been a long day already. It's almost 5 o'clock.
Well, there's two more things that need to be done today. One's a personnel policy, because it fits in with the budget that we just passed, so they need the two of them. And I kind of opened my mouth earlier and told the Dunmore Association they'd have a answer today from staff, so if we do those two things, Josh, then we could adjourn and bring this back for Thursday. Thursday if you want, or? Okay, it's up to you guys. Do we keep going or?
Or would the 27th, like a week from now? If we, and then do and then do council at 1.
I'm going with, let's work till 6. Let's get done some more. We're here now.
But
Days buggered.
Okay, so who made the motion to extend? Ernest did. It's extend until after 5. Vote. Carried. CAO report, Tara Lynn.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you use the CAO report, is there any questions? Yes.
Shane,
How did the meeting with Alberta Parks in relation to emergency response in the Cypress Hills Interprovincial Park go?
It went good. We're having another one tomorrow. And so it was shared that we don't have capacity for what their expectation is for emergency management down there. And so I think they were, I think Mr. Swain was kind of shocked by that. And so we're meeting, we have it at 10 tomorrow morning, I believe. And we are going to continue the conversation.
any other questions? Shane?
Under purchasing, I noticed we got 3 Mack trucks. I'm just curious on Max because it was brought, I was talking to a trucking outfit that dealt nothing but Max, and now they're getting rid of them all because they can't get parts. And so I was just wondering, the Mack all of a sudden.
So the Mack trucks are for the future sanding trucks. When we did the research on parts and recalls, they didn't have as many recalls as some of the other providers. And the reason why we chose Max is because it fit with the horsepower requirements and stuff that we had for the trucks more than Kenworth and the other units. Yeah. And it,
Any other questions?
Thanks, Kim. No, it was brought up. It was interesting that it was just brought up by an outfit when we're discussing it.
Is there any other questions? Not seeing any. Darcy's moving the CAO report. Vote. Carried. Counselor, start with Ernest.
Did the SDBA training, eked out a win with passed with 85%, and that's about all I did.
I had a CWA meeting. There was a little misunderstanding with one group. They didn't understand exactly what was happening with the horsefly spillway mitigations. Anyway, we or I guess I did, kind of filled them in a little bit and told them where to go and get the research on it. So anyway, that worked out good.
Here's our counselors telling them where to go. Eh?
Yeah, exactly. Where to go and how to get information. Nothing to report on my end here.
Test it. Michelle?
Had an FCSSAA director and board meeting, and then the next day we had just the provincial board meeting. A couple of highlights that came from there was people are getting tired of virtual meetings and they're calling it virtual overload. When they had allowed, they made the ministerial order to have the food as part of the FCSS. Well, now that the third wave's hit, they need it again, but they took off the ministerial order and it will take months and months to get it back in. So they're trying to work on some sort of system that if this happens again, they can get it, that when the need arises, it can be put on easier than it was before. We'll just leave that. I received an email from one of the counselors from Wheatland County, and I figured I'd share it with you guys. It says, over the last 2 months, multiple municipalities have reached out to the government of Alberta in regards to the public health order and the existing restrictions. The response from the ministries were insufficient, just a stamp of acknowledgement in the hopes to make the province, the provincial government aware of the concerns that are swelling on the grassroots level with the path taken regarding mitigating COVID-19. We are asking you as municipalities to stand together and join us in signing this letter outlining the issues we as the province are facing economically. There is strength in numbers as our MLAs have shown. We must stand by them and show our discontent with the choices made by the government of Alberta. And they're just asking us to send off the same letter that they are, just like we did before. From Wheatland County, that was.
Is it from a counselor or from?
From Jason Wilson, yeah.
From a counselor, not the council.
No, a counselor sent it to me. But actually this was written by their council. That's the letter that their council is sending out. I had a CVF with Cypress County meeting. Yeah, we'll just leave that. And the rest I told you earlier. So we're good. Just in the interest of time.
Darcy?
The meeting with Tara Lynn and Petra, and sat there and minded my P's and Q's with the two gals. Getting complaints about the CP rail, the train going through Irvine. Apparently, I'm not sure what's happened, but like they're going faster or what the deal is, but there's like their furniture in their house is bouncing and stuff now. And so we sent a letter to Glenn Motts and the CP, and verdict is that they should start a petition so we can keep it moving forward. So that'll come in here pretty quick.
So it's considered a fast line. Heading westbound at 60 miles an hour. Eastbound is 55. And so we, Leslie Ann filled out the Community Connects and tried to forward the concerns. We hadn't heard anything. So we reached out to our MP. The next day, pronto, we got a call from the intergovernmental relations person with CP. And he was very good. But he said that it's regulated under the Canadian Transportation Agency Act, and they have federal jurisdiction. And I said there is some concerns, and more than likely that a petition will be coming their way in regards to it. And he was like, okay. So, but it's considered a fast line through there, and now they fixed the track so they can go fast through there.
Michelle?
Don't they have speed limits going through hamlets, even for trains? No.
Mm,
That's scary. Not really close to that back.
Richard?
I participated in the meeting with Peter Swain. And, that's about it.
Oh, I had a Highway 320 meeting. They're getting a bunch of the agreements signed to start with the 20 to Burdette. They're getting good progress made with the Pecani Nation there to twin through the reserve. That's going well. I've been dealing with some complaints in my ward of dust and maybe some illegal campgrounds and that I'm looking into. It just seems to be ongoing. And that's about it.
Oh. Boy, oh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My report's on written on there. So is there any questions on any of the reports? Not seeing any, Richard.
Can I ask that Leslie Ann sends the Dan's report from Kirst Devon, the comments that we had recorded to the Elk Community Association, and then June could send them out to all the residents there so they know exactly what's going on with the snow removal, because there's so many different ideas. And the conversation was with Ray Ranke, so we went as high as we could. So what you're reading here is the gospel, okay? And that should clarify a bunch of things. Doesn't mean they're going to be happy, but this is the way it is.
Okay. Shane's moving the reports. Vote. Carried. 10.1, Tarlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cancellation of taxes on grant in place of taxes. That is the what the province forwards us for grant in lieu. For the budget last year, they would only pay 50%, and so of their what they've previously had contributed. So the recommendation is that Council direct administration to write off $23,227.01 of the tax revenue as presented in Schedule A.
Okay, somebody want to make that motion? Ernest? Any questions? We're on to 10.2, Tarlin.
They allocate $7,880 to the Hilda Community Association with funds coming from.
Oh, Michelle made the motion. You took too long.
Pardon me?
What is the deadline for the most? I thought it was the end of March originally. Did they extend it?
No, it's the end of March.
Permitted. So basically the way that we did the report, and we had this approved by the province before we did it, was we could claim any outstanding tax balance on March 31st as a most effect or a COVID effect. So essentially we now have the cash. It's approved under the SFE.
So, okay. So now it's too late.
Between now and the end of the month.
Okay. So
We
they
can
can
bring
still
it to
submit by
next
the end of
council.
April.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the motion went that if they're a community group that's listed under our rec funding.
Did I call for the vote on that? Any more questions on it? Vote. Carried. 10.3, Tarlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A request for a tax refund. The recommend motion that counts information, and on page 124 is the letter received from the ratepayer.
Somebody want to make a motion on it? I think we've had quite a few of these come through before, and we've always, it's been made forward that it's up to the ratepayer to watch what the tax bill is and bring it forward. It's not the positive attitude. Uphold the previous taxes. Any questions? Vote. Oh. Michelle.
It would be the homeowner responsibility to come in here and tell you guys that they tore down that house, right? It's not our responsibility to go out there and check.
So, so they get an assessment notice, so it's up to its responsibility of the assessed person to make sure that the information is correct. And we do re-inspections too as well, but it didn't.
No. Every so many
No, we do
years.
mass appraisal.
The way she's just explaining it, they tore the house down and then, didn't do anything.
And that's the importance. So that's why like splitting out the tax notice and the assessment notice, that's the importance of it too, is that people can appeal their assessment, they can't appeal their taxes. So your assessment notice is so important to make sure that the information is on there, because that's what you're going to receive as your property tax bill invoice. So it's very important that people kind of sometimes disregard their assessment notice, but it is vital to make sure everything is correct on there.
Yeah. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Vote. Carried. 10.4, Tyrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Soil Stabilization Program. The recommended motion, the Council direct administration to proceed with the 2021 Road Stabilization Program as presented. And our Director of Public Works will present.
Any questions?
I don't have.
Oh,
I don't have one.
okay, now there's questions. You want to check the folder?
Yeah, it's the 4th, like it's right away.
Well, you can make a motion, then you can ask a question.
Okay, number A as amended.
Okay,
How's that?
whatever floats your boat.
Well, for number one, Ernest got a road that he's talking about. And number two, I got a road. The old Trans-Canada Highway, that oil part, we got to drop the speed limit because it says 80 right now and it's getting very washboard. There's blowouts on it. It's falling apart. And if somebody hits that at 80, the washboards, they could lose control now. So I think we got to drop the speed limit and we got to look at doing something with that oil piece on that stretch there in front of all them businesses.
Yeah, and I think you're correct. The MG30 would be the proper type of surface for that because that's a heavy haul road and it just gets pounded out. And every year we spend $60,000 repairing that road. So, so it's something that MG30 would probably alleviate some of those issues.
But in the meantime, I think maybe we should really take a serious look for liability wise of dropping the speed limit to 50 instead of 80 on that piece. Because it is, I just about lost control. That's why I'm bringing it up when I hit the washboard.
Robin.
Ernie's got a road, Shane's got a road. I think Dustin's got a road too. Like, would this potentially be something that, like that Range Road 65, I've talked to him for 4 years now about, and would that MG30 be something good for that? Like I'm motivated to, I know when we first got on this term, that was the one thing that you and I talked about. I know, but it's always on the plan. It's been on the plan for a long time.
It was on the maps that I handed out to council
Okay.
last meeting. And I said, if you have any changes from the maps, just let me know. And there was no comments. So I just produced those maps into a map.
Yeah. Well, when did that get handed out? At last council, there was a map?
Yeah, I handed out all the maps 2 council meetings ago.
yeah.
Oh, when I wasn't here, when I was virtual. That's why.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Kim.
But we can bring it back and all it was those maps that I handed out into one map to go with the program. So there was no changes from what I presented already. So
Okay, so do you want to postpone this one till next? Are you in a hurry for this one, or can you wait till next council meeting for this one, Kim?
due to time, we can, because there'll probably be some conversation about this. Yeah,
So Shane, do you want to table it?
I'll send it to him right now.
Do you want to table this till next council?
So the plan is, Mr. Chairman, that Kim's going to email it out to everybody. Please take a look. If you have any that you'd like to add, please respond to him so we can put it on the next agenda. Cool.
Okay. So this is tabled. Shane's making motion, table this to the next council meeting. Vote. Carried. 10.5, Tara-Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personnel policies. So the recommendation that council approve policy HR1 bereavement, 2, 3, all the way to 14 here on the recommended motion. The reason you is the current personnel policy is one massive document, and it is not user-friendly. And so what my team has worked on taking that document and making individual policies. And there was some changes to the individual policies, and that's on page 129. And many of it is for clarification and also Alberta labor standards. Leslie Ann took the lead on it, and if you have any questions, she would love to answer them.
So go ahead, Michelle.
I might as well make the motion to accept, but or as amended. I got a few things. I think they're basically all the same, but on page 138, whatever that one is, there's the word normal in there. And that word drives me crazy because normal is just a setting on a dryer. It should be like regular hours. There's a couple of them like that. Hang on, I gotta find it. It's page 138. I wrote the page number down. 138. Yeah, there's a few of them in there, and that was my question, was if we could take all those out and change them to regular. That was it. Yeah, it was number 7. That it is. Yep.
Normal exchange.
And the only other thing that I had was page 146. I can find it. Just above the B, it says vacation earned directly correlated. Is that supposed to be vacation pay? That's right. It just sounded funny when I read it. Okay, then I'm good. Get rid of the word normal and I'm a happy camper.
There's nothing normal around here.
Exactly. Normal is a setting on a dryer. It's not.
Dustin?
Okay, under, oh, sorry, gotta find it. Under the position descriptions, I noticed one, and I think Wes probably is aware of what I'm gonna say.
So
Yes, so this has been a long process. We're mostly focusing on the policies that directly affected like hours of work and stuff to be for the operations plan. And I know through attrition, a few positions are kind of changing. So going forward, now that we've split this large document into easier policies, there is going to be some things that we'll be bringing back to you guys in the near future, just for easy amendments, once things are kind of sorted out. So you are correct. There does need to be some changes to
I'll
it.
give you my 3 pages if you want them.
Yeah, that's good.
Dan? So with that being said, are we approving this in draft form right now? So good.
No, I think we're approving it the way it is right now, and then they'll do the changes as they go through and find other ones. Because they need this in for the hours and stuff because of the motion that we made last council when we changed over all the graders and everything else. So this is imperative that they get this in now. And then, yeah, it's in plan coming up here. And then the other stuff that they've missed, they can bring back as easy changes in the future. Les? Yeah.
I mean, and if Councillor Kirby, he makes a good point. And if Dustin, I can be honest, I didn't take a lot of time with that one. I was more focused on the hours of work and the sick time. But I mean, if council so chooses, they can approve the rest of them and we can just leave that one and I can bring it back next meeting and clean it up for you guys. If you don't want to approve it the way it is, that's fine.
I'm just thinking from a process perspective, like we passed the one that you need or the ones that you need to have done kind of a thing. And then to ensure, because otherwise, it goes, you put something through, you don't get to it for a year or 6 months. Next thing you know, it's, especially if there's things that we know that we need to fix, I'd prefer to have them fixed before we go and approve them because it is perceived as being good then down the road.
It's up to you guys. No, just as amended. Any other questions on it? Not seeing any other questions? Vote. Carried. 10.6, Tarlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lead testing program. Before you is information. There's an information brochure on it. Recommend motion that council receives the lead communication brief as information. Is there any questions?
Richard?
I read it over and yeah, it's just basically stuff we got to do. So when we get to it.
Testing takes place from May till September, correct? And the communications are going out to begin the process. So we wanted to make sure you knew what was going on because you might get some calls from ratepayers. So
Yeah, West Side Water Co-op's doing the same thing. And yeah, you got to find a house that's old enough and you got to ask to get in.
it's prior to 73, I believe, isn't it, or something like that around there?
Michelle?
Just a question. If the homeowner gets their water tested and there's lead in there, does that mean that they absolutely have to get it fixed? Or like in my case, what I'm thinking is my house is 100 years old. I'm assuming there's lead in there. But if I get it tested, does that validate it? Mean I have to change everything? Or can we just let it slide?
No, that's a good question. No, there's provisions that the municipality can do to help with that lead exposure, from water softeners to different things we can do internally, from changing some of the fixtures. Now, Cypress County has done a really good job over the last 10 years in replacing a lot of that old pipelines. So we're not really concerned as much with our distribution system as we are from the curb stop into the house. So there are things we can do in the house, but if it's just a fixture, you probably would not be over that legal limit. But yeah, so what we do, that's the reason for, like as Councillor Oster mentioned, is when we solicit that information, you sign a release form, And so then that information goes directly to the province, and then we will get CC'd on correspondence from that, but it'll go directly to you. Yep.
Any other questions? Vote. Carried. 11.1, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Range Road 23, recommend motions that council direct administration to repair the existing roadside drainage, excuse me, on Range Road 23 to prevent further deterioration of the roadway and place a 30-kilometer signage at the top of the hill and appropriate signage that describes the road hazard. And 2, that council direct administration to retain an engineering consultant to determine timelines and associated costs to bring up the road to AT standards and engage the Alberta Historic Resources Impact Assessment and potential First Nations consultation with a budget of $50,000 coming from the Accelerated Rehabilitation Fund.
Take a breath when you're reading like that. Thought you were going to pass out over there.
I drank enough Diet Pepsi today, no. There's substantial information, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what motion to make though. Yeah.
I would probably do number 1.
Yeah, I'll make number 1. And then I have a question too. Can you do that? Like I was looking at this map and the whole thing is got lines through it. Can you even clean out the ditches without the engineer's report or whatever that is?
Yes, we won't be able to put any of the waste material on the road slopes because that'll be outside the roadway. So we'll have to haul it out. But the first part of the motion was just because we're getting major deterioration because the water's not going down the ditches anymore. It's going down the roadway. And until we get further information from an engineer, what we want to do to permanently fix that road, this would help stop the eroding, because if it keeps on going up, you're going to get that. There's one spot where it's going right down the middle of the road and it's dropped probably about 30 inches. So if it keeps on going, you'll just see that whole part of the road just go, because it'll keep on eroding down and down and down. And so this was just to prevent further deterioration of that roadway. And then to bring back further information from council on a permanent fix, if they so choose. We will do that all internally within our own budgets. We have an estimated value of about $15,000 to $20,000. That's just doing the drainage repairs. That's minor. Yeah.
That was my question, was to say to, repair the road and then get budgets afterwards. I thought maybe budget first, but if you've got that already, that's not a significant expense.
Yeah, this was just to clean out some of because the sloughing has filled in all the ditches. So now the water's just running down the road and it's deteriorating it pretty fast. So this was just to prevent that, to give us time to come back. Yeah.
Okay.
Still give kind of light access to BT Grazing Association. So it'll work with the function a light function of the road.
For what they were asking for. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Vote. Carried. I think. Everybody vote again. Hold your hands up. Okay, carried. 11.2, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fire flow testing. Director of Public Works is going to do a brief presentation.
I can do the presentation and we can go through slide by slide. Yeah, maybe we'll do that when we have time.
We got all night, Kim.
Okay.
Here. Do you want,
here's one. All right, so fire flow testing, this goes an overview of what fire flow testing does, because we've had a request on what and where fire flow testing. So why should we flow test hydrants? Insight gained from proper hydrant flow testing. So it's not just a tabletop exercise, it's you get your practical. So you figure out system pressures and flow rates, assessment condition and operability. This is usually when your fire flow testing is when you usually screw up your infrastructure. So that's some places, smaller municipalities don't do it because it costs them money, usually in repairs, but it's good to do that because then you know infrastructure works. Water quality characteristics and opportunity for customer interaction. Okay, why is hydrant flow testing important? This goes from the operational insight to technical knowledge to utility management and practical experience. So it's good for not only for the fire department to know what will be coming out of the hydrant, but it's also good for public works to know that the infrastructure is working. Sorry, does anybody mind if I go a little short like that? Okay. Why should we flow test hydrants? So available fire flow rates. So that's something we don't have here. A lot of municipalities will have their hydrants painted different colors to represent different flow rates. System planning model calibration. So that's when we're doing some planning or future subdivisions, then it helps plan for that to make sure you're meeting those capacities and maintenance management. So as you see there, if you don't flow your hydrants, you will get some brown water if you don't do it very often. Okay, hydrant flow testing considerations. So site conditions, you don't ever want to try to avoid flowing hydrants in freezing temperatures. Dechlorination, more you flow hydrants, it creates some turbidity in the line and you will have your free chlorines tie up and then you'll have a lower chlorine rate. Orifice size matters. So when you're flowing your hydrants, it depends upon, like if you're sucking it through a small straw or big straw, it's kind of the same analogy. Hydrant flow testing considerations. So there's a couple ways you can do it. We'll go through a couple of these. There's electronic readers, and then there's dial gauges, there's flow meters. See if I have the next one. So you see there's a gauge on the bottom and they'll flow the hydrant for a period of time, let's say 20 minutes. It'll show how much water flowed to that hydrant, and then that'll be part of your calculations. Hydrant flow testing terms. So residual hydrant, so located near your flow hydrant. So that's actually how you measure. You don't measure out of the hydrant that you want. You measure it out of the adjacent hydrant because that's how you get residual pressure, your static pressure. Utilized to measure pressure within the distribution system. So that's, and your static pressure is pressure during typical demands with no hydrant flowing. So typically your demand is more at 5 o'clock, between 5 and 8 than it is at noon. So just because that's when people are home. Residual pressure, it's pressure measured while the flow hydrant is open. So that's important because that affects the rest of your distribution system. Oh, I'm going a little too fast. I'm not pushing it. Okay. Hydrant flow testing terms, field test flow rates. So flow rates measured during a hydrant flow test and actual flow rates of water exiting the flow hydrant. And then available fire flow rates is calculated value based on the field test flow rate and the measured residual pressure during the test. Now, the reason, I know it's very technical, but the reason why this slide is in there is because what we had at Bull's Head was we had a field test where we had this much water, but when we actually did the calculation said we would have a different amount. So sometimes you get differences in what your modeling would have opposed to what you're actually coming out of the hydrant. So in your standard for determining the fire flow at available occurs at residual pressure of 20 psi. So if you have a residual pressure of less than 20 PSI, you're not meeting your fire flow capabilities for the remainder of your community. Calculations, so all your numbers go into a water model, and then it'll come out with hydrant flow testing. So you'll actually get flow rate at different hydrants. And then you'll also be able to measure the static. So if there's residual pressure at different hydrants during a flow test. So that's an example of doing a calculation. So you have your 1 meter, and then you got your field rate. So you see the time. So they're doing a test over a time period. And then you got how your residual hydrant pressure readings. So if it's static, transitional, or residual, and you see how that's dropping down. Hydrant flow test setup. So when we do a test, it's a calculation base. So you got to have your flow hydrant and your residual hydrant. So you gotta measure both. You can't just flow one hydrant and say that's the pressure. No, it's about a system, operating system. So hydrant flow test procedure. So identify flow and residual hydrants, evaluating traffic control needs. Obviously, you've seen where the water goes. It goes down the gutter, it goes down the middle of the road. So if you do it in April, or scheduled in April, and you have freezing nights, then you're going to have some issues. So it's making sure that when you do it, you're being conscious of all your surroundings and confirm test equipment conditions and availability. Residual hydrant, locating hydrant and property flush to remove sediment. So that would happen on a normal basis. Install pressure gauge and open hydrant, confirm no leak, reading gauge record. And I took out a slide where it shows where you don't, a lot of times you'll see that your hydrant will be floating in a lake. It'll just drop and then it'll just come off because it's just a pressure fitting. So, and then you got big issues. Flow hydrant. So you locate your flow hydrant, you estimate discharge path. As you can see as you've seen, like I think Radcliffe has it, so they connect to a truck and then it shoots underneath the truck. So it keeps the directed flow going down underneath in the gutter. And you open hydrant, record the pressure. So did I miss one? No. So this is the important slide. So the cost to evaluate fire flows in isolated system would be approximately 30 to 45,000. Most municipalities publish the flow rates in their GIS system. So when they have on their website, you can go on your mapping system, you can click on a hydrant. So for example, the city of Calgary, you can click on a hydrant, you can see when it was flow tested and what the flow test rate would be. And that's important for insurance purposes. Once completed, the test would be performed every 5 years. That's to meet your fire capacity. So there's no need to do it every year, but the minimum is 5. And communication would have to be paramount for public understanding of process and procedures, because when they start seeing all the water going down, and then depends on when you're doing it. So some of the negativities, so if in July, if you're having water restrictions and you're doing hydrant flowing tests, that's usually not a good phone call to a counselor, and then it comes back to me. So those are all things that we have to, or actually go to Tara Lynn and then it comes back to me. But anyway, that's when we were talking about fire flows, one of our hamlets that would be the closest to fire flow capabilities, which we're extremely confident would make fire flows, is Desert Bloom. We actually just did some major improvements to 7 persons with the booster pump, and actually in the next one you'll see some good pictures and then public works report of orifices that are closed into just about a pinhole. And we think that now with the improvements at 7 persons and the fire pump and putting that on a VFD, that we would be able to meet fire flows in other communities. But we wanted to, if council so desired, because I think that was why we got, it was a motion to bring this back, was to start with one community that we're extremely confident in, and then start going down the list. And then we can break down fire flow capabilities.
Any questions?
So if council so desired, we can bring back we could do a recommend motion now, or if this desired, we would bring back a cost of to do one hamlet and then to proceed from that, instead of doing them all and then only getting one or two.
Dustin?
So your costs show here that it could cost up to 40,000 to do it.
Per hamlet. So that's why we didn't have an RFD to break down. Do you want to do all the hamlets, or we thought we would start with, if you want, we would break down, bring it back in RFD form to just do one hamlet, or just get some more direction on that.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we do Desert Bloom to start with, and then bring back an RFD to do the rest of them. Because if we know Desert Bloom is going to pass, I think it's viable to do it right off the get-go, because that'll save the homeowners a pile of money by doing it. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Alf?
Yeah, I agree with Dustin, because I don't think, like Suffield, I don't think we'll meet the flow. Like, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't meet the flow.
You wouldn't probably meet it through the whole community, but you might meet it in certain parts of the community. But that's something that we would bring back, breakdowns of every community. But yeah, and then when we do this, then when we make changes to that community, then you would look at that as an option, especially with what we're doing at Suffield.
Okay, everybody knows. Oh, Richard?
So I guess my concern was, and I think you just answered it, to spend this kind of money so that people's insurance is cheaper. I struggle with that, okay? Because it depends on which company they're working with. But if we're going to use this information for future planning, then I'm good with it, okay? And is that kind of the goal then, that we would see what we got, and then for down the road,
It would depend if it was a service level of council that they wanted to meet fire flow capacities. If they didn't want to meet fire flow capacities, then I don't know how you would incorporate it into a planning, but it was, well, I think somebody's going to answer that.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think it's valuable to know where and which hamlets have fire flow capabilities, so that when businesses come along and say, well, we'd like to develop in Cypress County and in this hamlet, then we can, share that information with them, and then they can make an informed decision of, what their responsibilities may or may not be in order to develop and meet the Alberta building codes.
okay, yeah, that I see that side of it now then. And so if somebody wanted to build in 7 persons, we're going to want to know, like if they did something commercial, we're going to want to know there's water.
No, it's part of their building code process that they actually have to do that they have to go to the meter up front, do a static pressure test. So that's something, even if you knew your fire flows, they still have to do that.
Yeah, but it would give the planning people a bit of a heads up, right?
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, the motion is to, Ernest, do you have something?
I was just gonna, one quick question. Do we check our hydrants just for functionality? Like go through Dunmore or whatever and crack them open and see if they actually work?
That's through the chair. That's part of our unilateral flushing program. So we do that to use water to scarify the pipes. So to take out some of that sediment that sits there. So that's something that we do annually.
Yeah. Okay. I just wondered, because we do it in Elkwater, just the fire department has a day we go. And it's amazing how you find some that don't turn or no water.
Okay, Dustin, Robin?
Just going to further to Ernie's question, it tweak something for me. Do we have the ability to do kind of our own version of the test? Obviously, it's not going to be certified the same way, but it would allow us to kind of do internal testing that would allow us for research and modeling that doesn't require the same 40,000. We might spend a bit of money, get an insight, and then know what is worth investigating further and what's not.
That's a very good question. And I actually didn't think about it until you brought it up. So that's something that we can work with our regional partners, because we don't have the testing equipment, but I know of a couple municipalities that do, that we could borrow or rent, or, you know, just to bring it back to see if, are we wasting money, or is there a point to the exercise? Yeah.
Mercy.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that on the ones that you think are gonna pass, it would make sense to do it the right way, but the ones that aren't, go see what happens first, right?
Okay, everybody knows what the motion is. Dustin has made. Vote. Yeah. 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 Carried.
Thanks.
All right, we're in the 12.1. Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So delegation business if required. The Dunmore Community Association, their asks were if council would consider contributing $50,000 to a playground. So there's an RFD here on page 300. It shares the previous council motions for playground equipment. And the recommended motion is that the council contribute up to a maximum of $50,000 to the Dunmore Community Association for playground revitalization of the Dunmore Park. And the funding would come from the Recreation Reserve, and there's $502,000 in there right now.
Michelle.
I'll make that motion. And my reasoning for this is my friend and I went for a walk through Dunmore last week. We parked at the park, and it's kind of depressing. And everybody else has got very, very, or not everybody else, but we have put a lot of money into parks for other communities. Whereas Dunmore is right on the highway, it's close to Medicine Hat. If we have one hamlet in this county that there's going to be visitors and people seeing, it's going to be Dunmore, or 7 Persons, but 7 Persons already has a very nice park. So.
Any other questions or comments? Robin?
In the past with other parks and stuff, was it a matching grant? The only thing about this one that I felt was a little bit different was that they're asking for 50 and contributing 10. I wasn't too sure if in the past, like with the schools and urban or whatever, was that a 50-50? I thought that we were matching it up to a certain point.
Well, I think the other playgrounds were quite vast and large, and they were $120,000 structures. From their presentation today, they are reusing a lot of their painting them and that sort of thing. They're revitalizing them. So it's a kind of a different situation.
Shane?
Didn't we put a bunch into Sandy Point one?
Yeah, 50,000 went there.
Into
We've
the
done
Sandy Point?
50,000 for 5 of them so far. Yeah. Read your package, it's in there.
It was in there.
Mr. Chairman, also too, funding can be taken from contribution in lieu of land. We have that as well.
Well,
So
and that's the one that's actually for parks or trails or.
yeah, and so that the Dunmore Trail is already allocated, I believe, out of that funding as well. There is funding in the rec reserve.
I think we should keep taking it out of there because we've done all the other ones, and Robin, none of the other ones were matching. We come up with a number that would help them, And like, I think when 7 was done, they had 250,000 in theirs or something, and Irvin was big, but yeah, it's just, this is what we're willing to put in.
I think they're all different.
I'm pretty sure there was no stipulation, like, I think every other community got the 50 grand. And I know when we were looking at it, there was no condition there to say that we had a matching grant or anything else. So, and we're very fortunate that we did get a grant, so you get more for your punch.
What, you want 50 now too?
Okay, any other questions on it? Vote. Carried.
And also to Mr. Chairman, they like to knock down the old skate shack. So because it's a building, and so to knock her down
Knock her down. Okay.
along with the potty.
Well, we're doing.
Yeah, we're doing the potty,
yeah.
but it's gonna be gone soon too. Is it gone?
Was it
Fabulous.
gone already? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're giving permission to knock that down. Dustin's making that. And rebuild. Okay.
With regards to that new building looked nice. I'm just curious because if we end up taking over the structure, is there any kind of request that we want to put in on tempered glass or something like that that's not going to be easily vandalized by kids, potentially being broken or anything like that for windows?
So could include in the motion that addition that Cypress County wishes to work with the association on specs of the building?
Yeah, I think that just to consider that.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He's mad at it. Do we do that to other things? So like when the community halls do that, we don't tell them what to do. They just do their additions and stuff. So, Michelle.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. I mean, even if it's got windows in it, it's still 100 times better than what's there now. So I don't think we should put any restrictions on it.
I'm not really.
And at wheelchair accessibility, and that sort of stuff. How about we work with them? They're very easy to work with. I've had a couple meetings with them. They're a great group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tempered glass is.
Yeah,
expensive.
they've got it. I was so impressed by their presentation today. I was really impressed. Really impressed.
Yeah. What's that? Okay, so Dustin made the motion to allow them to tear that old one out and rebuild a new one. And they can work with the county on the new one for the specs. Okay, vote. Carried. 12.2, I think that one's just received for information.
I believe so, Mr. Chairman.
Dustin moved it. Do you have something to say on?
Can you distribute? I would be very curious to look at that spreadsheet. Awesome. Do you mind just forwarding that? Thank you.
Okay, any more comments on it? Vote. Carried.
And do we want to bring up the other matter with this one while we're talking about it quick? Because we were going to leave it till after this presentation.
Well,
and we
did we not okay? No, we okayed that.
No, we didn't.
I think we'd requested that staff talk to him about potentially delaying the response until after this meeting. So I guess I wouldn't mind just an update on what the status is.
We allowed it. They just put the conditions in the offer to purchase. That's what we okayed last time. Travis can straighten it up.
So through the chair, I've had some conversations with Mikhail here the last day. We've talked a lot about it. I inherited this file from John on the end of the day, Thursday. So talked to Mikhail yesterday. It was hung up on a real property report, and then it was hung up on some misunderstandings on what exactly the parcel lines were that he was purchasing. He thought when he went out there that when you look on the map, I don't know if you're able to bring it up quick, but if you look on an overhead, it looks like the property line, there's kind of a square on the property and it goes farther east than it actually does in reality. So there was kind of, we were talking apples, he was talking oranges. So we're kind of at the drawing board on this a little bit with him. Hope to have more resolution and clarity with him in the next 24 hours. I told him I'd speak to him again tomorrow after today's presentation. I don't exactly know where it's going, but he's kind of, the timeline is the most important thing for him. He said all of this work is tied to government grants. So for him, he said he has to have this finished off by the end of the week. So that took precedent for him over establishing concrete lines and things like that. He still wants to move ahead with his project the way it was talked about last session. He still has every intent to do the project based on what we're talking about at the same price that we talked about and that council approved last meeting. So there's more conversation on it, and the planning supervisor and I and the CAO will be working on that likely in the next 24 hours with some clarity to come. So still a lot of moving pieces, I think, on this property exactly.
But the offer that we accepted his offer, but it said right in the condition that we're not obligated for that to be a.
That's correct. Yeah, it doesn't tie it to any future development. You're not on the hook for
Drainage,
or
sure,
any
anything
future
like that.
concerns.
Yeah.
That's all
And then
up
we
to him
don't,
to
and we
apply
don't
for.
have a plan for that.
That's right.
And that would be at their risk and their obligation to complete.
Right.
And he's well aware of that.
And he mentioned today that he's doing some land testing and soil testing. So we've given him authorization to go do any soil testing that he wants on the property to ensure that it does fit what he wants in the future. We just won't close the deal until he gets his result on his soil testing. I think he's doing it either himself. It sounds like either he's certified to do it or a colleague of his is. So they're doing their own soil testing. Again, that's a condition that he added to the contract. So the contract just wouldn't close until all those conditions are met.
Leslie?
Kayleen just texted me and she just said, before anything, we need to get the subdivision approval.
Yeah.
For them.
So, yeah, we're covered. We covered it off so that we wouldn't have an issue. Okay. Okay, so we'll move that one just for information. Oh yeah, you brought. Don't confuse me. It's been a long day.